We're back with another question today.
Back with another question.
This is from a user at bills.4573. Any voltage over 50 volts is enough to kill you, AC or DC. There's nothing safer about AC over 50 volts. Bypass diodes and power optimizers should resolve any shading issues for string inverters. A string inverter is a single point of failure which can be replaced with any other string inverter versus microinverters which must be compatible with each other. Which means you're stuck with Enphase, and because both installer and homeowner can't trust any other brand of microinverter to still be in business in a decade or more from now. This was in relation to the micros versus string inverter video.
Great question, Bills. Thank you for the question. I'm going to start with, and it's a long couple of questions, so you may have to remind me what the back end of the question is. However, the juiciest and most interesting part of that is 50 volts is 50 volts. Doesn't matter if it's AC or DC. As a licensed electrician, I'll tell you that's totally not true. DC current, direct current, is relentless, like it's ruthless. You look up DC arc faults versus AC arc faults, and 50 volts of DC versus AC. Very, very, very different type of technology or electricity, if you will, a different way that electricity behaves. You know, they each have their pros and cons, by the way. AC is just far more controllable, you know, on a home, circuit breakers, safety switches, it is far more safe. Now, what I'll test Bills with is, I love this this comment of it's not actually safer. I want anyone to watch who's watching this video to do me a favor. Get your phone out and Google DC string inverter fire. Take a couple of minutes, leave me now, come back to me, whatever you got to do. And then I want you to do the same thing with AC solar fire or Enphase microinverter fire. Let me know what you find, because what you'll find is actually nothing on an AC Enphase system fire on the internet at all. I've looked long, deep, I've researched it for so long trying to find a case of it and trying to see what had caused it, and I cannot find a single thing. Now, I'm not saying they cannot catch on fire. That's not what I'm saying at all, and touch wood that they don't. But there is far less risk of them catching on fire, to the point where you won't find anything on the internet about it. Now, in a perfect world, DC is totally fine. If it's installed by an absolute ace, an electrician who really, really cares, if it's installed to the highest level possible, and the components that are used to support this DC system are genuine MC4 plugs. There's no mismatched MC4 plugs. They're crimped in a factory, like to perfection. You're going to have very little problems. The problems arise when, yes, you've bought a Fronius inverter, which, as we know, is one of the greatest string inverters ever made. There's no ifs or buts about it, right? And SMA is fantastic too. Like, both of those, if I was going to put a string inverter on my house, they'd probably be my two options. The challenge is that you don't know the brand of the MC4 plugs. Are they actually genuine MC4, or what are they? You also don't know the brand of the DC cable being used. You don't know if it's been cut. You don't know the conduit. You don't know the installation method. One of the reasons we do Enphase only and microinverters only is to completely eliminate human error. On the roof, there is actually zero man-made crimps. There's not zero man-made connections. We do connections on the roof, and we wire AC isolators and junction boxes. If they fail though, the circuit breaker is very likely just to trip and turn itself off. Now, obviously we don't want them to fail, and it's not our intention. Has it happened before? Absolutely it has, right? And it's super safe, it turns itself off, and it's fixable. And we fix it. With a DC fault, and the most basic example I can use is like a rodent chewing through a DC cable versus a rodent chewing through an AC cable. Because newsflash, they're both on your roof, right? You'll have an AC cable for Enphase, and you'll have a DC cable if you do a string inverter. If a possum or something chews through that cable, and they break that DC connection, and it's in sunlight, it's under load, that arc will just it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger until it actually starts a fire. And it's almost impossible to put it out when it's on the roof under your panels. What are you going to do? Like, jump up and remove a panel to break that circuit? Like, you tell me. It's nearly impossible to break the circuit. It's just actually not. With an Enphase microinverter system, if that same rodent was to chew that cable, it would actually trip a circuit breaker. And if it didn't trip a circuit breaker for some unknown reason, the microinverters would actually shut down and you would have zero voltage coming from the microinverters down that AC cable. Now, let's say neither of them actually happened. AC cable can sit there with a break and actually, like, it will arc when it's very close, but as it pulls apart, that air gap, that resistance in that air gap is enough just to extinguish that arc. It's not going to pull out, 10 centimeters, 20 centimeters. That doesn't do that. That's not the characteristics of AC. And the reason for that is because it's alternating current. It alternates over a reference point of 0 volts, right? So it is actually far safer than DC, and the inherent risk with having DC on your home versus AC, the DC comes with far greater risk to fires. Even if you're not talking direct risk to humans, let's talk about risk of fires. That is actually one of the biggest risks, of course. So yeah, I completely go against that with those reasons that Enphase is far safer. Some DC string inverters, such as SunGrow, Fronius, maybe even SMA, are working on a technology called Arc Fix or it's something like that. I don't exactly remember what it's called. Rapid arc detection or something. And what happens is if they detect a DC arc, the inverter is saying that it will actually shut off, right? Which is fantastic. The problem still lies with the panels wanting to put out that DC. The inverter on a DC string inverter system can never tell the panels to turn off unless it has DC optimizers. Now, why go put DC optimizers on your roof? There's actually no need for DC optimizers anymore at all. They are totally redundant and useless. If you need a DC optimized solution, you might as well spend the money on Enphase and have a far safer, far more reliable, greater warranty product on your microinverter with minimal to zero crucial points of failure, where versus something like a SolarEdge where it still has DC optimizers on the roof. Yes, there are no moving parts on the roof, which I'm a big fan of no moving parts on the roof, but it still has that string inverter down the bottom and it's still working really, really hard. So you've got that central point of failure down the bottom as well as failure points on the roof. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and rag on SolarEdge, but trust me, we've tried them and I wouldn't put it on my own home. So I'm certainly not going to put it on my client's home. So for us, it's actually totally not an option. By the way, for those at home and for Bill, like Penrith Solar does around 14, 15 installs per day. We do a lot of solar and every single one of them is Enphase and every single one of them works. They don't catch on fire. We don't have to go back to random roof fires and that was close. DC string inverter system operators and installers, doesn't matter how good they are, they can be the best of the best. They do have those problems. And let me tell you, I sleep really well at night.
Yeah.
If they were the same price, I'm not naive to the fact that Enphase does cost more. Microinverters do cost more than a typical string inverter system and a DC optimized solution. But at the scale we do it at, the gap ain't very big, right? The gap's actually very, very small, if there is even a gap. Now, my argument is any electrician in the world, any solar installer, if they cost the exact same amount, you'd have rocks in your head to tell me that you wouldn't do Enphase. So what does that say? Hey, Bills, really appreciate the question. If you're actually an installer or you've got a bit of knowledge, always open for those kind of discussions.